When discussing the origins of the Iranian peoples, most accounts begin with the emergence of the Medes or the establishment of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC. This, however, represents only a later chapter of a far more ancient story. Long before the rise of the first Iranian empires, the ancestors of the Iranian peoples inhabited a very different world, and their journey would ultimately shape the history of the Near East and Central Asia. In this video, we will discover who the first Iranians were, where they came from, the development of their language, culture and religion, and how a collection of tribes eventually gave rise to one of the greatest civilizations of antiquity. Our story begins in the vast grasslands of the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Around the 5th and 4th millennia BC, this region was inhabited by a people who spoke a language known as Proto-Indo-European. They were primarily pastoralists whose wealth was measured in cattle, sheep and horses. During the early Bronze Age, the most influential archaeological culture to emerge from this part of the world was the Yamnaya culture. Its people developed a highly mobile pastoral economy, making extensive use of wagons and domesticated horses to travel with their families and herds across vast distances. Over the following centuries, these steppe populations expanded in several directions. Some migrated westwards into Europe, while others gradually moved eastwards. As these migrations continued, their language gradually diversified into numerous branches, eventually giving rise to languages as diverse as Greek, Latin, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic, Hindi, and Persian. Among the cultures that later emerged across the eastern Eurasian steppe, one would play a particularly important role in the history of the Iranian peoples, the Sintashta culture. Emerging around 2100 BC, the Sintashta culture introduced very important innovations. Its people built heavily fortified settlements surrounded by timber-reinforced earthen walls and defensive ditches. Within these settlements, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of advanced bronze metallurgy and specialized craft production. Despite living in large fortified settlements, their economy continued to rely on animal husbandry, and horses assumed an increasingly important role in both daily life and ritual. Perhaps the most important innovation, however, was the development of the horse-drawn chariot. These innovations transformed warfare across much of the Eurasian steppe. Chariots provided unprecedented speed and mobility, while advances in metallurgy enabled the production of increasingly sophisticated weapons and tools. Competition for resources, long-distance trade, and conflict between neighboring communities likely contributed to the emergence of a powerful warrior elite. Over the following centuries, descendants of the Sintashta people gradually expanded into Central Asia. They would become part of a wider world of peoples whose shared language and culture are known today as Indo-Iranian. Their movement southward brought them into contact with one of the most remarkable cultures of the Bronze Age, the Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex, more commonly known as the Oxus Civilization. Flourishing between approximately 2300 and 1700 BC, the Oxus Civilization was very different from its neighbors. Its inhabitants lived in permanent settlements, many of which developed into large fortified cities with monumental architecture. Archaeologists have uncovered massive defensive walls, palaces, workshops, and carefully planned residential quarters. The Oxus Civilization was connected through long-distance trade with Mesopotamia, the Iranian Plateau, and the Indus Valley. Its inhabitants were accomplished craftsmen, producing finely worked stone vessels, elaborate metal objects, and distinctive seals that have been discovered across a vast region of Central Asia and the Near East. Their religion also appears to have been highly developed, as evidenced by monumental temples and ceremonial complexes. For many years, archaeologists regarded these two worlds as largely separate, the urban civilization of the Oxus and the pastoral societies of the Eurasian steppe. Today, however, increasing archaeological evidence suggests that the Indo-Iranians and the inhabitants of the Oxus Civilization interacted over several centuries through trade, cultural exchange, and occasional intermarriage. Eventually, the Indo-Iranian peoples split into two distinct branches. One, known as the Indo-Aryans, migrated south into the Indian subcontinent, where their descendants would contribute to the development of the Vedic civilization and compose the earliest Sanskrit texts. The other, known as the Proto-Iranians, gradually spread across Central Asia and the Iranian Plateau. As the Proto-Iranians expanded, they gradually divided into numerous tribes. Although often separated by great distances, they continued to speak closely related forms of the Proto-Iranian language and shared a common cultural and religious heritage. Although the Proto-Iranians left no written records of their own, scholars have been able to reconstruct their religion, or at least many aspects of it. They revered numerous gods and goddesses associated with the sky, fire, water, and the sun. The natural world was believed to reflect the divine order, and maintaining harmony between humanity and the gods was one of the central concerns of this early religion, while ritual sacrifice and the recitation of sacred hymns formed an important part of religious life. Fire occupied a particularly prominent place, serving as a sacred medium through which prayers and offerings were presented to the gods. Priests were responsible for preserving these hymns, rituals, and sacred knowledge, passing them orally from one generation to the next. Our knowledge of this early religious world comes primarily from the Vedas of India, especially the Rig Veda, and from the Avesta, the oldest surviving collection of sacred texts of the Iranian peoples. The Avesta is a compilation of hymns and prayers that were transmitted orally for many centuries before eventually being written down. Its oldest portions, the Gathas, traditionally attributed to Zarathustra, the prophet of Zoroastrianism, preserve an exceptionally archaic Iranian language known as Old Avestan. It should be noted that historians approached the Avesta with caution, as the surviving manuscripts were compiled centuries after the events they describe. However, when studied alongside archaeology, comparative linguists, and other ancient sources, it provides a unique glimpse into the world from which the Iranian peoples emerged. One of the most important clues to the identity of these early peoples is preserved in both the Avesta and the ancient Vedic texts of India. In their oldest traditions, both the Proto-Iranian and Indo-Aryan branches use the word Arya or Arya as a self-designation. Following their gradual separation, however, the term evolved in different ways among the two peoples. Expressions such as Aryanam, meaning of the Aryans, and Aryana, the land of the Aryans, gradually came to describe both the Iranian peoples and the regions they inhabited. In the Middle Persian language, the name eventually developed into Iran, from which the modern name Iran is ultimately derived. When the Proto-Iranian tribes gradually entered the Iranian Plateau during the late 2nd and early 1st millennia BC, they did not arrive in an empty land. For thousands of years, the plateau had been home to numerous peoples and some of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient world. Among them, none played a greater role than Elam. Emerging during the late 4th millennium BC, Elam would remain one of the dominant civilizations of the Near East for more than 2,000 years. Unlike the great river civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, Elam occupied a remarkably diverse landscape. Its territory extended across the fertile plains of modern Khuzestan and into the rugged highlands of the Zagros Mountains. The greatest cities of Elam were Susa and Anshan. Susa lay in the fertile lowlands, and its strategic position near Mesopotamia made it an important political and commercial center. Anshan was located in the highlands of present-day Fars. It was one of the principal centers of Elamite power for much of its history, and played a crucial role in the political organization of the kingdom. The Elamites developed one of the earliest traditions of literacy in the ancient world. Although they adopted the cuneiform writing system from Mesopotamia, they spoke their own distinct language, which remains one of the greatest linguistic enigmas of the ancient world. Unlike the Indo-European languages that would later spread across Iran, or the Semitic languages of Mesopotamia, Elamite has no universally accepted linguistic relatives and continues to defy definitive classification. the Elamites worshipped a large pantheon of gods associated with individual cities and natural forces. Among the most important was Inshushinak, the patron deity of Susa. Other major gods included Humban and Napirisha, who were especially revered in the mountains. The greatest surviving monument of Elamite religion is the magnificent ziggurat of Choga Zanbil, constructed during the 13th century BC. It remains one of the best preserved religious monuments of the ancient Near East and the oldest standing monumental structure in Iran. Elam was not the only sophisticated civilization to flourish on the Iranian plateau. Another was the civilization of Jiroft, centered in the fertile Halil River valley of southeastern Iran. Flourishing during the 3rd millennium BC, Jiroft occupied a strategic position between Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Indus Valley, allowing it to participate in extensive networks of trade and cultural exchange. Excavations have revealed large settlements, monumental architecture, and evidence of complex urban planning. Jiroft is particularly famous for its extraordinary chlorite vessels, carved with figures of snakes, eagles, and mythical creatures. These objects have been discovered far beyond southeastern Iran, demonstrating the wide reach of Jiroft's commercial connections. Some archaeologists have suggested that inscriptions discovered at Jiroft may represent one of the world's earliest writing systems, although this interpretation remains the subject of considerable scholarly debate. Across the Iranian plateau, numerous other regional cultures flourished during the Bronze Age, evidenced by archaeological discoveries at the sites of Shahdad, Tebe Yahya, and Sahri Shokhta. The formation of ancient Iran was the result of continuous contact between incoming Iranian-speaking tribes and the diverse cultures that already inhabited the region. Over many generations, the newcomers and the older inhabitants lived side by side, trading, intermarrying, and influencing one another's way of life. One thing, though, is clear. Over time, Iranian language, culture, and religion gradually became the dominant traditions across much of the plateau, while many aspects of political organization continued to reflect the influence of the older settled civilizations. This process unfolded across an enormous region known today as Greater Iran. Throughout antiquity, these lands were linked by trade routes and seasonal migrations, allowing the Iranian-speaking peoples to remain connected despite living hundreds or even thousands of kilometers apart. The geography of Greater Iran played a major role in shaping the peoples who lived there. In the west, the rugged Zagros Mountains separated the Iranian plateau from Mesopotamia, while further north, the Alborz Mountains stretched along the southern shores of the Caspian Sea. Between these mountain ranges flowed numerous rivers, whose fertile valleys supported agriculture and permanent settlement. Further east, the landscape became increasingly dry as it gave way to the vast deserts of Kavir and Lut. Yet even here, countless oasis settlements sustained farming communities and thriving trade routes. Beyond the plateau lay the fertile lands of Bactria and Sogdia, watered by the great Oxus and Jaxartes rivers, while further north stretched the endless grasslands of the Eurasian steppe. Each of these landscapes encouraged a different way of life. Some Iranian peoples became farmers, others prospered through trade and commerce, while many continued their nomadic pastoral traditions. The natural world was equally diverse. Dense forests covered the Caspian coast, while oak woodlands spread across parts of the Zagros Mountains. Wild goats, sheep, and leopards roamed the mountain slopes. Lions still inhabited parts of southwestern Iran, and the open steppe was home to vast herds of gazelles and wild horses. Over the centuries, the regional differences created by geography, migration, and interaction with neighboring civilizations became increasingly pronounced. The many Iranian tribes gradually developed their own dialects and customs. Among the western Iranian peoples, the Medes gradually established themselves across the Zagros Mountains and the northwestern regions of the Iranian plateau. Their economy combined agriculture, pastoralism, and regional trade, while their proximity to Mesopotamia brought them into frequent contact with powerful neighbors such as Assyria and the Kingdom of Manaea. Further south, the Persians settled in the region known as Parsa, where they lived alongside the Elamites. Over many years, close contact with the Elamites profoundly influenced the development of Persian society, contributing to its political organization and material culture. To the east, the Bactrians inhabited the fertile lands around the Oxus River, while the Sogdians occupied the rich oasis regions further north. Their position along the great trade routes of Central Asia encouraged farming, commerce, and urban life, and over time they became renowned as merchants who connected the civilizations of Iran, Central Asia, and later China. Beyond these settled lands lived the nomadic Iranian peoples of the steppe. The most populous were the Saka, known to the Greeks as the Scythians, together with related tribes like the Massagetae. They travelled with their animals in search of fresh pasture and lived in portable dwellings. From an early age, they learned to ride and fight on horseback, and their mastery of mounted archery made them some of the most formidable warriors of the ancient world. Horses occupied a central place throughout much of the Iranian world. The fertile valleys of the Zagros Mountains and the Iranian Plateau provided excellent grazing land, allowing horse breeding to flourish across many regions. As a result, cavalry became one of the defining features of Iranian warfare. Although the Iranians did not begin producing written records of their own until the 6th century BC, they first emerged into the light of history through the inscriptions of their powerful neighbor, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. As Assyrian kings campaigned into the Zagros Mountains, their inscriptions mentioned various Iranian peoples, among them the Parsua or Persians and the Madai or Medes. It is important to note that the terms Persian and Iranian are not synonymous, even though they are often used interchangeably today. The Persians were only one branch of the much larger Iranian family, alongside the Medes, Bactrians, Sogdians, and many other peoples. Every Persian was therefore Iranian, but not every Iranian was Persian. The same distinction remains true today. While Persians constitute the largest Iranian ethnic group, they are only one of several Iranian peoples. The name Persian itself derives from Parsa, the homeland of the Persians in southwestern Iran. This ancient name gradually evolved into Pars, and following the Arab conquest of Iran in the 7th century AD, it became Fars. It is from the Greek form of Parsa transmitted to the West as Persis that the English word Persia is ultimately derived. The word Iran, by contrast, has a much older origin, as we have already seen. Thus, while Persia originally referred to the homeland of one particular Iranian people, Iran came to denote the land of the Iranian peoples as a whole. By the beginning of the first millennium BC, the Iranian peoples had spread across an enormous territory. Although divided into many tribes and kingdoms, they remained connected by a shared culture and ancestry. In time, some of these peoples would rise to establish powerful states that would shape the history of the ancient Near East and the wider world. The first to achieve this were the Medes, whose rise marks the beginning of the next chapter in our story.